Hi everyone, it's BritSimon. I haven't posted any videos or gone live for a little while, and actually I'm recording this one. It's Tuesday morning, California time. My internet connection is for some reason really bad at the moment, so I didn't want to go live and have connection problems. I thought I'd jump on and record a video, and obviously some of you will already know, this might be news to some of you, that the visa bulletin has been published this morning showing all regions as current, um, uh, and um, and there are some country exceptions. So Egypt is at 18,900, Iran at 6,400, Nepal at 6,400. So let me just quickly explain for some of you that don't know what current is supposed to mean and what those country exceptions are supposed to mean. Essentially, current is when the government believes the visa processing unit, the visa office, actually, they believe there are more visas available than remaining demand, right? And that there is time to process the visas. There is no need anymore to restrict the numbers, so that we give preference to lowercase numbers and that sort of thing. That, frankly, in itself is bullshit. You've got to understand, if you've been paying any attention at all, that is nonsense, right? So that's just, I'll come back to that in a minute, but that's nonsense. I mean, that, the fact that they think that there are more visas available than remaining demand just shows they don't know what's going on. The country exceptions for those that are interested: Egypt, Nepal, Iran. Those countries tend to have very high numbers of selectees, and so they tend to sort of restrict the process a little bit in those countries, slow it down, so that people in Cairo, for example, people at the embassy in Cairo, with thousands of cases for Egypt, will be slowed down a little bit so that they can space that over the full 12 months. Same thing for Nepal and for Iran. That's nonsense too. Iran is not being interviewed at the moment because the interviews take place at 3 other embassies. And there's really no need to restrict Iran, other than saying that they've got a lot of selectees, but so have other countries. So anyway, the whole thing just makes no sense, right? And I've said to people in the past that if they do this, and Charlie Oppenheim had suggested that he was going to make people all regions current in June, and he's gone ahead and done that. I'd emailed him and actually explained to him why his view of the world is so incorrect. His view of the world is incorrect because the way the process is supposed to work is that KCC are processing the cases. They're processing the DS-260s, and then they're processing the documents. At the time when both your DS-260 and your documents have been processed, you're ready for interview, right? And you could say you're documentarily qualified, although the lawyers might argue that, but the KCC seems to treat the document submission and processing as the point at which you're documentarily qualified. So they are telling numbers to the visa office, Charlie Oppenheim, how many cases in the remaining backlog, as it were, are documentarily qualified. And Charlie looks at that and says, okay, well, we're almost to the end of the year. We've only got June, July, August, and September in terms of interviews. We're 2/3 through the year. And we only have this number of people that are documentarily qualified who are ready for interview. And so now I can just release all of the visa numbers and everything will be lovely, right? And in a normal year, that might work. But in this year, we know damn well that the reason that there are not many cases ready for interview is because KCC haven't processed all the DS-260s, or more importantly, the documents, right? So I've been saying for several months now, send your documents, send your bloody documents, right? because I was seeing this car crash about to happen. KCC have not been processing documents. They shut down operations essentially for several months during COVID crisis, right? So from around about September of last year, I think possibly August, they essentially stopped doing much of the work that they normally would do. Their staff are contract staff, they're contractors. They worked from home for a little while, but they really didn't make much progress. And so, from the period of, let's say, September through till, January, February time, they didn't do very much at all. And then they kicked up operations when, PP 10014 was removed. It seemed like things were going to get better, but they've not increased the speed of processing fast enough to justify anything like saying that there's enough documentarily qualified people for interviews. We've got statistics that show the number of embassies working. Not all the embassies are working. There are at least 50 embassies not doing anything out of 135 or so embassies. There's about 50 not doing anything at all, refusing to interview people at all. The other embassies so far have only taken small amounts of interviews, not very many at all. We've not seen a flood of interviews or anything like the sort of volume that would be needed to get us, back to somewhere normal. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. So people had asked before why I was saying that going current would be a bad thing. My answer was that it would be chaos, but I didn't really elaborate on what the chaos will mean. So let me explain now what the chaos will mean. You probably are thinking, because your case number just went current, that you're going to get an interview, and you're probably not. The majority of you are not going to get an interview. You're not going to get your green card this year unless a couple of things happen. Right? Number one is an extension of the time. September 30th is a deadline. It's a hard deadline. It's set by law. It can't be extended without an act of Congress. And so it needs a lawsuit to reserve the visas, to set aside all the visas and tell the government, look, you've done a crappy job. You need to continue processing visas. I'm not 100% convinced that's going to happen this year. It happened last year through the Gomez lawsuits, and 9,000 visas were set aside for later processing. We don't know for certain yet if those visas will be processed. We don't know when. The Gomez case, by the way, is probably going to be more like a May, perhaps even a June decision. But the lateness of the Gomez case doesn't really matter. People didn't, just need to not freak out about that. Once you're past September, you're past September. It doesn't matter whether it's, April or May or June. It really doesn't matter. You're just going to have to wait for the Gomez outcome. But we would need a similar lawsuit and outcome in order to preserve a majority of visas for DV 2021. And as I'm sitting here right now, I don't see where that's coming from. I don't see the activity necessary to get that sort of decision. So that would be one thing. The other thing would be that KCC would massively step up its operations, and that all the embassies would step up their operations and start interviewing a massive volume of DV candidates. But that's not going to happen. The system is KCC sending interviews to the embassies, and there's a whole sort of systemic process behind that that's necessary. So, let's say, could you suddenly send 1,000 interviews to a particular embassy in some country that was normally used to experiencing 30 interviews a month? No, of course you couldn't. You couldn't do that because the embassy itself will have restrictions on staff. They're going to be operating at some sort of lower volume than normal, not higher volume than normal, but lower than normal. The medical arrangements to see a physician in that country won't be geared up for such a high volume, to be done all of a sudden. Won't happen. And the background checks that KCC do, there's not going to be a high volume of staff for that. And KCC themselves have not got a massive amount of people working. They're barely answering the phone right now. I mean, they're for some months now, they've just not been answering the phone. They're there, they're working, but they're not answering the phone because, they either are fed up with answering the phone and having nothing useful to say, or they don't have enough staff. I don't know what the answer is, but it's a mess. So now you're all going to be current, and you're going to be confused as hell because you're happy that you've gone current, and congratulations for the high case numbers. But it isn't going to do you any good. That's my fear. So I think we need to be honest with each other. I don't think it will help you if I blow smoke up your butts and say, everything's going to be lovely now. It isn't. It isn't going to be lovely now. And if you think it is, you're a fool, frankly. There isn't a happy ending for this one. So I think this is going to be a really dark stain on the DV lottery, history. And frankly, making the regions current just makes it worse. It was always going to be bad. COVID has affected DV 2020 and DV 2021. Both of those are badly affected. I don't want to get into comparisons about which one's worse off. I find that whole discussion just annoying and stupid and childish, frankly. Both are badly affected, DV 2020 and DV 2021. Both are unfairly affected. Absolutely certain. There's no way to sort of justify what's been going on. It's daft. COVID is a terrible, terrible thing. There's no doubt about it. And it's affected people in dramatic ways, but the government have completely failed to take proper steps to mitigate the disaster. Now, I understand the Biden administration have got, probably bigger fish to fry. They've got bigger problems on their plate than just this. I get that. But nevertheless, after 2 or 3 months of Biden's administration being in office, I was hoping to see them put back the organization a little bit faster than they have. The organization was decimated by the Trump administration. The Department of State organization, the system itself, it was decimated. All right. The Secretary Mayorkas has talked about that. He's talked about this. His word was the system was gutted. The immigration system was gutted. Gutted because they let people go. They didn't replace people. They created this negative attitude about the whole thing. They obviously fought directly against immigrants and immigration, but they certainly weren't looking to improve things. And so there's no doubt that the Biden administration inherited a bad scenario, and there's no doubt that that's going to take time to turn around. I'm not a child. I know that it's going to take some time, but but you have to be able to walk and chew gum, as they say. You have to be able to do two things at once. And I think that I'm disappointed that the Biden administration have not been able to fix this faster. In 2 weeks' time, just over 2 weeks' time, DV 2022 results will be released. That means there'll be a flood of DS260s into KCC. KCC, if they're sensible, will put those DS260 submissions to one side and focus their efforts on DV 2021. I hope they'll do that. But if DV 2020 Gomez suit is also, awarded in our favor, you imagine the system that is already broken now, when it's only trying to do DV 2021, is then going to have to try and cope with DV 2020 because of the Gomez suit, and DV 2022 because there's 100,000 new winners. It's going to be a mess. There's no way this can have a happy ending by September 30th. So realistically, the only real chance like I said, I don't think KCC are going to sort this out. I don't think the embassies are going to sort this out. I don't think the physicians are going to be able to deal with the volume. I don't think the background checking can work. There's a couple of things they could do. KCC could say, okay, no more document processing. You know, whether you sent your documents or not, we're going to schedule you for interviews. I'm not saying they will do that. I'm saying they could do that, right? So please don't get your hopes up saying BritSimon said, you know, they're not going to worry about documents anymore. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is they could do that, right? That would be one way around the problem that they've created. So that, as in years before, a couple of years ago, the mere submission of your DS260 would then be enough to get you at the interview. That would be a tremendous step forward. If they did that, however, Charlie Oppenheim and the visa office would have to regress. It's called retrogress or regress the numbers from current back to something more sensible, because everybody would then become available for interview, ready for interview. Everybody that submitted DS260, which is pretty much everybody, or everyone that's interested, and there's no way they would be able to continue with the with the aspect of current. But of course, again, having the visas available, having the regions current on the one side from Charlie Oppenheim's point of view, and the reality from KCC and the embassy and the physician's point of view, the reality doesn't match with the visa bulletin and Charlie Oppenheim's view of the world. There's like two separate worlds going on. There's like no connection of logic between the two. You know, all that has been lost. So, you know, one thing would be a dramatic change, as I say, at KCC to enable lots of interviews. The other thing, as I mentioned before, would be an extension of the time somehow. Either, you know, an act of Congress that says, yes, we're going to extend the time. I don't think that's likely. That's not being discussed. Or a lawsuit that sets aside, you know, some number of visas, takes 20,000 visas, 30,000 visas, whatever number you want to say, you know, 40,000 visas, 50,000 visas, whatever number you want to say. Let's not argue about the number, you know, but whatever number you want to say, and set them aside for issuance later. But again, that's just kicking the can down the road, because DV 2022 processing is going to happen next year. And, you know, it's like, who do you impact because of this? Who's going to pay the price of the COVID problems? Do you just write off DV 2020 and DV 2021 saying, oh, well, that was bad luck to be in that year, just as it was bad luck, for example, to be in DV 2012, where the whole thing got screwed up? Do they do that? I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know what to say about what they should do. But I think you guys need to understand, you know, how serious the situation this is. So if you're celebrating about the visa bulletin being current, then frankly, you probably don't understand what's going on. So there you go. So I'm not a believer in Twitter campaigns, but keep them up. You know, let your embassies know, you know, what's going on from their perspective. You know, keep the pressure up for embassies to actually start processing. But, you know, in the 50 or so embassies that are not processing at all, they presumably are doing that because of increased COVID activity in those countries. I mean, there are some countries which are still on a very much an upward peak. The whole world as a whole had its highest day for COVID cases yesterday. So whilst America, for example, North America and certain other places, the UK, for example, while there are some countries where COVID cases are coming under control and the trajectory is downward because of the vaccination program, there are other countries where the COVID crisis is not even in full swing yet. And it will get worse before it gets better, because there are not large vaccination programs going on. 3 million people have died from the COVID pandemic. You know, it's a serious disease. I understand that embassies don't want to submit their staff, some of whom are local staff, some of whom would be Americans abroad. But they don't want to submit those staff to any exposure of COVID. I understand that, and I agree with that decision. I don't. Um, I'm not someone that says, you should put those people in harm's way, but they could find ways by Zoom meeting or something. They could find ways to interview people, and they've had a year to figure this out. And I haven't been to my office in a year, right? So, but I've continued to work. The rest of the world has figured this out. Why can't the government? Why can't the embassies figure this out? Why can't they do, the DV lottery interviews are very, very simple interviews. There's nothing complicated about them at all. They take typically 2 to 5 minutes to do the interview. There's no questions really. They're simple interviews. They could do those over a Zoom meeting. They just have to see someone. And if they were on a Zoom meeting and they were at all nervous, or at all unsure about the applicant or whatever, they could then invite that person in for a physical interview, and in that way, they could reduce the number of physical in-person interviews. So they could certainly find ways, but they've chosen not to do it, or I don't know why. Okay, just thinking if I need to talk about anything else. Not really at the moment. It really is. It's a matter of which embassies are processing and which embassies are not processing. I will talk about rescheduling, etc., moving embassies. Just looking at the latest stats from Save Diversity Visa, he's saying that and I appreciate. He and I have had some email conversations, so I appreciate his efforts on this. I know he's particularly interested in one of these embassies that is not cooperating, but he's listed 87 embassies that have actually accepted interviews, have started issuing or refusing, adjudicating cases. 87. So there's 135. Yes, so it's about 50 embassies that are not processing. Okay, so one of the commonly asked questions I'm getting at the moment, for obvious reasons, is if my embassy is not processing, they're not interviewing, can I switch to another embassy? So the process for that is, there's two ways of looking at it. One is asking KCC to switch you because they haven't yet scheduled you at either embassy, right? KCC will do that in some cases. They've done it in the past in some cases, but they're obviously resisting doing it in large volume. And in any case, the embassies that are processing, the 87 embassies, they're not dealing with their own backlog yet. They're not at the level that would be needed to deal with their own countries. So those embassies are likely to prioritize their own local inhabitants first. And there'll be some that will accept some transfer cases, but not many. But if KCC are involved, so prior to scheduling the cases, KCC will just hold up your case. If they know that your embassy is not scheduling, they're not going to schedule your case. So you have to contact KCC and explain why you want to be moved to another embassy, why you want to get an opportunity to be interviewed at a neighboring embassy. Be honest. There's no point in lying. It doesn't help you to lie, and it's going to backfire on you. So be honest and explain that you can actually travel there. If you have a legitimate connection with that country, like you're living abroad. Let's say you're from Germany, but you're living in the UK at the moment, and the UK, I don't think London is I don't think London is actually scheduling cases. So this is a legitimate case. Where, or let's say Switzerland, because I know Bern is scheduling, and it's a pretty low number embassy. So let's say you're from Switzerland, you live in London, right? London's not scheduling. KCC are not sending out your interview notification to London because London's not scheduling. So you contact KCC and say, I'm happy to be interviewed in Switzerland, in Bern, right? Please send my interview there. And you could also contact the embassy in Bern and make sure that they've got availability of appointments. And then you can tell KCC that the embassy in Bern are happy to accept your case and interview you, and that you're happy to travel there. And it's, you can drive there, you can fly there, you can drive there from London, get in the Eurotunnel, and you can go by train, plane, or automobile, right? You can get there. And so you would then go ahead and do that. So you take matters into your own hands if you've got that sort of situation. If you're from one country but you live in another country and that other country is not scheduling, do take matters into your own hands. Contact KCC, contact your embassy, and see if you can make something happen. And good luck with that. If, on the other hand, your case has been sent to an embassy, and which would be weird, but if it had been sent to an embassy, which then later got closed down, so they've scheduled you already for May interviews, but for whatever reason the embassy then closed down, right? You can contact the embassy that you'd like to be moved to, agree that you can be moved to that embassy, and then contact the embassy that is holding your case that is now closed down, and they can transfer the case between them. But you have to get agreement from both of those embassies. That's a possible way to get things done as well. You can do it that way, but at the moment it seems KCC is just not scheduling cases where the embassy is not accepting it. Then there was one further point. It's about the two NLs themselves. Because the visa bulletin has just now been released, we will now see some interviews being scheduled in June, right? We'll have to see the numbers. We'll be able to track the numbers as it happens. I expect the first cases to be scheduled within the next couple of days, right? And the normal old process was that two NLs were sent just in 2 batches a month. One very shortly after the visa bulletin, within a few days of the visa bulletin being issued, and the second batch was at the end of the month, and just before the end of the month, right? And the reason that they were in 2 batches was because of 2 different scheduling systems at the embassies. However, in the last month to 2 months, we've seen 2 NLs being sent on various days, right, throughout the month. So, there could be 2 NLs sent pretty much any time. And it will be interesting to see whether they continue to send interviews for May or whether they now switch on to interviews for June. I suspect they'll switch on to interviews for June. But there could be 2 NLs on any given day, right? Monday through Friday at least. So we'll see, we'll probably see some larger batches in a couple of days, and we'll probably see another large batch towards the end of the month. But there could be other scheduling as well as embassies make themselves available. Okay, so we'll track the numbers and I'll report back on the numbers. Again, that's something that Save Diversity Visa is able to do. It's not a great name, but I understand why he named it that way. But anyway, that he's able to track those those stats on a daily basis. Okay. Yeah, there was a lull in those oddball 2 NLs for the last few days. And the lull makes sense. It's like they were tidying up May, right? And now they've probably switched in the last week. They've known these numbers for a little while, and so they knew it was going to go current, I should imagine. They will now see they'll now see June interviews being scheduled over the next few days. All right, okay, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to post this video immediately, and hopefully this is useful for you. I'm sorry we can't do a question and answer session. As I say, hopefully my internet connectivity problems will be fixed later on today with better luck. I don't know, what's going on really with it. All right, thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Keep well now. Bye-bye. Good luck to everyone.